Hello, everybody. My name is, hello, everybody. I just saw that little thing that said live. My name is Kristen Roblatt. I'm an acupuncturist here in Santa Monica, California, and I'm also an expert in cellular healing. And I wanted to present some information tonight about healing the brain. All right, and I think that this is a very, I think this is very important, a body of information, because it really does affect so many of us. The number one concern of everybody over 60 is whether they're going to get dementia, diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. And it's a real concern. And I know that for me, it's a very important subject matter for me, because my mother and my grandmother both had high blood pressure related dementia. And even though I don't have high blood pressure, I know as I got older and I turned 50 and then I turned 60, we all go, oh my God, what's going to happen to my brain? So all of this information that I'm going to present to you tonight is based on a study that I think is absolutely marvelous. It's called the Multi-Therapeutic Approach Study. And it took 10 69-year-old men who were diagnosed with severe and acute dementia. And I'm just going to check to make sure that we're all happening. This is the first time I've done Google Hangout. So I'm so sorry. My assistant was texting me from her home and saying, yes, we can see you and hear you. So that's a good thing. So what I wanted to say is that this study used a lot of different things, to support these men. And there were stunning results. So I'm going to present that information. But I'm going to be looking down from time to time because I have some notes written down. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that there are 30 million people diagnosed with Alzheimer's globally every year. 5.4 million people in the U.S., predictions of 100 million people diagnosed with Alzheimer's in the year 2050. That is insane. And it's the third leading cause of death in the United States. 500,000 cases of people dying from Alzheimer's a year. And Alzheimer's and or dementia is not something that develops overnight. It starts 10, 15, 20 years before developing these hard things called amyloid plaque in your brain. And it comes from things like too much sugar, eating too many sugars, too many grains. And why is that? It's because it takes our insulin levels and it makes them go up and down and up and down and up and down. And our insulin levels in our brain need to be very steady and calm. We have an enzyme called insulin degrading enzyme. And what that does is it keeps our brain insulin very steady. We don't want it to go up and down. But about 5 years ago, it was found that not only does that IDE, or insulin degrading enzyme, keep our insulin very steady, but what it also does is it starts to break down that hard amyloid plaque that starts to develop in our brain if we do eat too many sugars or too many carbs. So this is a big consideration. Our diets are a big consideration, okay? And so we want to do everything that we can diet-wise to make sure that our insulin remains very steady. And I'm going to be talking about grains and gluten grains and not eating too many desserts, etc. But one of the things that I want to talk about, and this is my favorite subject, okay? And I want to talk about our cells. And I'm going to show you this lovely little picture. I hope you can see it. I think that you can. In fact, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can actually see it. All right, so this is a picture of a cell. And I want to talk about this just because I think it's really important that we know how our individual cells work, but also how our cells in our brain work, okay? So with each cell, we have what is called the cellular membrane, and that needs to be supple. This needs to have, be really rich in healthy fats and healthy cholesterol. And believe it or not, cholesterol does not have to be your enemy. And as you can see around, this cellular membrane, you see these little antenna-like things sticking up. And one is for insulin. And what it does is that this is a hormone receptor, and that hormone receptor accepts insulin into the cell. And this is for a hormone receptor for free T3, which is the active thyroid hormone. And that needs to be let inside the cell through the cellular membrane. Then we have, what is that? Oh, thank you. That is called leptin, Leptin. It's hard to read. And that is a hormone that is secreted by our fat cells, and it tells our body to burn fat for energy, not glucose for energy. Very important. And then this is a receptor that would take in a lot of our minerals. All right, so it's very important that that cellular membrane remains supple, because we want to have our nutrients be able to go very easily inside the cell and affect and nourish our mitochondria. This is what this is. It's called the mitochondria. It's the powerhouse of the cell. And it makes ATP energy. Everybody remembers that, ATP energy. Now, as we make ATP energy, what we actually end up making are some free radicals, and free radicals damage everything they touch. And so what we don't want to have happen is inside that cell, we don't want to have a high amount of free radicals damaging our brain cells or any of our cells in our body. So as a result of making ATP, our body also makes something called glutathione. Glutathione is the master antioxidant of the cell. And what that does is the glutathione comes over here, gobbles up these free radicals, takes them out through the cellular membrane, out into our liver, and they start to break apart in our liver and take it out of the body. All right, so we want that glutathione to really work properly. Also, as a result of making ATP, our body makes SOD, or super oxide dismutase, which is something that protects the inside of the cell. All right, and so it's very important that all these workings of the cell keep going on a day-to-day basis and are not blocked by anything. And then you see this down here called methylation. What is methylation? It is made from nutrients, a lot of B vitamins, and you have these little methyl groups floating all around in your system. And the importance of those methyl groups is, number one, they turn your stress hormones on and off. They help detoxify, they help reduce inflammation, and they work along with that glutathione. So methylation and glutathione are pals. And what is important is that they keep those cells running well. Now, what you don't want to have a high amount of is cellular inflammation. And if you can see right over here, this is what I call the toxic bucket. Okay, my finger's in the way, but the toxic bucket. And I know this is backwards when you see it. I'm so sorry, you guys, but I think that you can get an idea. I forgot that when I hold it up, it's going to be backwards, but maybe it isn't. I have no idea. Anyway, what that toxic bucket signifies is that things like heavy metals, pesticides, sugar, stress, anything that can turn into inflammation at a certain point, there's a tipping point, and that toxic bucket will spill out and cause a lot of inflammation around that cellular membrane. And when that happens, your nutrients can't get in the cell, you're not making enough energy to, to function and to heal your body, and all kinds of horrible things start to happen. Now, we especially don't want that nastiness to happen inside of our brain cells. Okay, we want to do everything that we can to keep our brain cells healthy. So we want to make sure that we don't, once again, have anything like, elevated insulin going on all the time. We eat a bagel, it goes up, then it drops. And then we want, then we start craving, we start feeling shaky, we get hypoglycemic, we need to eat some more sugar. We eat pasta, and it goes up again, and it goes down, and it goes up and down. And we don't want that, because Alzheimer's is now being coined as something called type 3 diabetes, all right? So it is extremely important to keep yourself away from all those toxins in your environment. And I know that we're going to be exposed to toxins, and there's no way, unless we live in a hermetically sealed bubble, that we can do so. But it's still very important. So I think that the other thing that I really want to point out is that it is important to nourish our brains, okay? There are a lot of nutrients and specific nutrients that we may be not feeding ourselves on a day-to-day basis that we need to keep our brain cells functioning in a very profound way. Now, I want to talk a little bit about grains and why they may be a foe. There are a lot of people that, unbeknownst to them, have gluten sensitivities. And I know people say, oh, you know what, that's just a fad. But it's actually not just a fad. It is something very real and very specific. And Dr. David Perlmutter wrote a great book. I suggest that everybody read it. It's called Grain Brain. And in it, he talks about the dangers of eating gluten and eating grains in regards to brain health. And he states and cites all kinds of studies, very, very important. It is written for the layperson, but it is very compelling. And I'm telling you, you do not want to eat a bite of gluten after you read that book. But what he talks about is the fact that people can be gluten sensitive. In fact, 90% of people who have gluten sensitivity don't even know it because they're thinking, oh, gluten sensitivity means I'm going to have really a lot of problems with my gut. I'm going to have diarrhea. I'm going to have stomach ache. But no, it can come in all different kinds of packages. There are a lot of different gluten or gliadin molecules, and they can cause problems in your brain. They can cause problems in your skin, in your lungs, in your gut, everywhere. So it's really, really important when you're thinking of reducing inflammation around that cellular membrane to cut out gluten, and especially if you have any kind of an autoimmune disease. And in regards to people who are starting to feel like they're losing their memory, they're forgetting their keys. Oh my gosh. I mean, people are really starting to notice that you're starting to have memory loss and it's freaking you out. You've really got to cut out the grains. You just got to cut them out. There are a lot of, or at least cut out the gluten. It's really, really important because you don't want to have those insulin spikes. All right. Now, the other thing that I want to say is that getting back to that study, that multi-therapeutic approach study, there were a lot of brain nutrients that they made sure that these gentlemen, these 10, 69-year-old men who had a lot of memory loss, they wanted to make sure that they had a lot of healthy fats. So they for sure did not go fat-free. They wanted to make sure they had iodine if appropriate, B12, methylcobalamin. They wanted to have them have the active form of folic acid called MTHF, antioxidants, glutathione, which is what I was referring to, CoQ10, melatonin, DHEA, all kinds of things. So some of those nutrients could be missing, and that could be really hurting the ability for your brain to be healthy and to function properly. Now, I'm going to talk about what happened in this study. So what they did was they took these 10 men and they did these things that I'm going to talk about right now. But they did these very specific things. What happened was they put them on a specific diet. They put them on specific nutrients. They put them on a specific regimen of exercise. And what they found in before is that half of them were not able to work anymore. And after 6 months, all of them were able to return to work. One of the men, before the study started, was so bad that he was losing facial recognition. He wasn't able to keep a daily schedule. But after 6 months, he was actually able to regain some of his brain function and actually be able to go back to work. These are unheard of results, and they are very promising for us all. So what I'm saying is, oh gosh, please, please, please really think about doing some of these things. And that's what I do with people. I have a lot of patients coming in with cognitive decline, and I put them on this particular program, following exactly what they did in the study, and people are starting to see definite changes in their memory, in their recall, etc., etc. So this is what they did. They did what is called intermittent fasting every day. And what that means is that you go 15 to 16 hours between the time you eat dinner until your next meal. So if you eat, let's say you eat at 9, let's say you eat at 7 in the morning, then you go 7 in the evening. I'm sorry, have your dinner, and then you go to 7 o'clock in the morning. Then you wait until 10 o'clock to eat your breakfast. So from 7 p.m. to 10 a.m. If you eat at 8, you go from 8 p.m. to 11 a.m. What that does is it gives your body enough time to start digesting, but it also produces a lot of human growth hormone, which is very, very important to start to heal brain cells. They also did a low carbohydrate diet called the ketogenic diet. And that is a very specific diet that is based on very low carbohydrates, moderate protein, and very high healthy fat. And once again, those ketones that get developed as a result of the ketogenic diet. And by the way, I'm not talking about ketoacidosis. I'm talking about low levels of ketones, very nourishing and very healing to your brain. They made sure that they did all farm-raised, organic, no grain meats and fish. No, very, very healthy meats, grass-fed meats, all right? They also did something called high intensity burst training. High intensity burst training is when you either run or cycle in place very quickly for 30 seconds to a minute, and then you stop for a minute and you let your heart rate return to normal, and you repeat that cycle 4 to 6 times. What that does, again, is it raises our human growth hormone, and it really is healing to our brain. Much better, actually, than real high-intensity long-term exercise, and you do that every other day. They made sure that their sleep was 7 to 8 hours, absolutely 7 to 8 hours. Very important, because when you don't get enough sleep, you don't create enough leptin. And leptin is, number one, something that tells your body to burn fat for energy, but number two, it helps you sleep. So a lot of older people have a lot of problems with sleep deprivation. And so they made sure that no matter what, that they were sleeping 7 to 8 hours. Also, they looked at their oral hygiene. Yes, they didn't want to have infections or anything like that, but they wanted to make sure that they did not have any amalgam fillings in their mouth, because they didn't want any mercury leaking into their system, but more importantly, mixing with their gut bacteria and going through the blood-brain barrier and lodging that inorganic mercury lodging in their brain. So the two most concerning metals for anybody with any kind of cognitive dysfunction, or people who are worried about being diagnosed with cognitive dysfunction, is both aluminum and mercury. And if you think that those amalgam fillings don't leak, you are sadly mistaken, because they leak. And it doesn't even matter. Perhaps some of you got them taken out by a regular dentist, which is unfortunate, because you really need to go to a holistic dentist, and he or she needs to know how to take amalgams out properly so that you don't get, all kinds of mercury vapor exposed. But one of the things I'm going to say is that I've had a lot of patients come in and say, oh, you know what, I had my mercury amalgams or my amalgam fillings taken out, I don't know, 10, 20, 10 years ago. And so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But during the time that you had them in, they were leaking mercury into your system and into your tissues. So this is a very important thing to find out, to have a urine toxic metal provoke challenge test, so that you know about where your metals are, and I do that test in my office for people. And then the other thing, once again, is to make sure that you have the proper nutrients, because if you don't have the proper nutrients, it is going to be not happening, because you're not nourishing your brain cells, very honestly. So you can't just do some of this and not others. You've got to do the whole thing. It's a whole program, and a whole program of supplements that I put together, all right? So I think the other thing that I want to say is just be careful with your environment. I really hope that you're not eating genetically modified foods. So you have to be very careful. It has to say non-GMO GMO or organic, but you don't want to be eating corn unless it's organic and says non-GMO, because genetically modified foods contain a very scary chemical called glyphosate. I don't know whether you have heard about glyphosate or not, but what happens with glyphosate, and I wish that it had never been approved by the FDA, but the reason why the FDA approved this chemical was because they said that glyphosate, this chemical, kills the weeds because it goes down what is called the shikimate pathway and affects the way that weeds grow. All right, and they said, listen, humans don't have a shikimate pathway, so the glyphosate in these pesticides in Roundup Ready are going to be fine for humans. But here's unfortunately what we found out recently: we don't have a shikimate pathway, but our gut bacteria does have a shikimate pathway. So that glyphosate goes right into our gut and turns our gut into a pesticide factory. So it's very important that you keep away from all kinds of pesticides, all kinds of chemicals. Go through and look at your cleaning products, look at the personal care products, stay away from perfumes and anything that you can't pronounce in the list of ingredients on your cleaning products, or anything that you can't pronounce on your in your personal care products, in your makeup, in your lipstick, and in your deodorant. Stay away from it. Go to the health food store. Get all natural things. It's really important, because all those chemicals that you use either in your house, that are under your cupboard, or the things that you use on your skin, in your mouth, etc., they all go through your pores. And yes, we do have a blood-brain barrier that keeps toxins out, but not all toxins out. And anyway, we don't want those toxins to create inflammation around our brain cells. And then lastly, I want to talk a little tiny bit about concussions and about getting bonked on the head, because I think that this is a really important consideration when you think about brain health. All right? So I recently heard an amazing audio tape by Dr. Royal Lee, who created supplements for a company called, or it was his company, called Standard Process. Maybe a lot of you have heard of that company, Standard Process. But the most amazing thing about this talk was he did this audio talk for people in the 1930s, I believe, and he was talking about what happens when you have a concussion. But he said, actually, it doesn't have to be a full-blown concussion. He can just, be like a little bonk on the head. So let's say you have a full-blown concussion when you have a car accident, or you fall down and smack your head and you get knocked out. Or even less is that a ball hits you in the head, or you play soccer and it keeps bouncing off your head, or you play football or whatever. When you have a blow to the head, what happens is there's a possibility that that blood-brain barrier can break open right at that area in the brain, and then brain proteins can leak out through the blood-brain barrier. Now, why is that significant? That's significant because those brain proteins are going to be seen as invaders. And then there's a whole autoimmune reaction that happens. These inflammatory cytokines go crazy, and they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they go into that poor part of your brain that was damaged. And I'm not talking about major brain damage. I'm just talking about from a bonk on the head, and that area is inflamed and inflamed and inflamed. And so it just never heals. So there is a protocol from Standard Process, and it's something that I also give people sometimes before I even start my brain health protocol, to seal up that blood-brain barrier in that area, and then give a couple other products that are going to start to heal the circulation in that area and create new cell growth. So it's very, very important. I am not going to stress enough how much I really hope that you all become very proactive about your the health of your brain and what you need to do on a day-to-day basis in order to keep your brain healthy. You do not want to slide down the hill. If you haven't already, it is not a pretty story. And once it starts, it becomes exponential. So you want to do all kinds of wonderful things to make sure that you stay healthy well into your 80s and 90s and 100s. You have all of your faculties up here. So this is what I want to offer. I didn't want to make this Google Hangout really long because I know this is at the end of a very long day, a business day, working day for most of you. But what I want to do is offer to each and every one of you an opportunity to have a private 15-minute phone consult with me. And so this is all you have to do. You can call my office. It's Lotus East West Medical Center, and my phone number is 310-828-8258. That is 310-828-8258. And here's what I want to do. You tell Dory or Cindy at the front desk that you came to my Google Hangout on brain health and that I want to sit down on the phone with you for 15 minutes and I want to talk about you. I want to find out what you're concerned about. I want to find out if you're forgetting your keys or if your memory is really getting bad at an accelerated pace. I want to find out what is happening with you. And then I want to see if we can partner together so that we can shore up everything that you need to do in order to get your brain healthy. So once again, thank you guys so much for coming and spending the time with me this evening. And I really do look forward to talking to everybody in a 15-minute consult. Once again, the phone number, 310-828-8258. Thanks so much. Have a lovely evening. Good night.